and welcome to R'lyeh Expeditions. Today we're going to talk about lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, well, actually, no. We're going to be talking about a GM's guide to conventions. So let's start off with what is a convention and what are the types of experiences that a GM can experience at a convention. First of all, let me just say that players, you're not going to miss out here. I will make a separate player specific video, but this one is more for your game masters. So conventions are built around a theme. Usually they're around geek culture. So there will be a whole heap of representatives. There will be a part of it that will be dedicated to comic books, to films, to collectibles, like collectible card games, like Magic the Gathering. There will be, depending on the thing, there might be a board games tournament, there might be a wargaming tournament, there might be a painting workshop. There's a whole heap of things that go into a convention, and the role playing part of it is only one part of the convention. So I think that this is the first thing I need to emphasize to GMs. Often when people go to conventions, remember that they're not there specifically to play. It's very different to your regular game that you run on a weekly or fortnightly or monthly or whatever basis that you run. So that's the first thing you have to keep in mind the whole time, is that player is only going to be at your table for a limited period of time. So the second thing I want to talk about this in relation to that particular point is that player often, now I won't say in every scenario, but that player often will be paying a fee to play at your table. So that money that they're paying for that experience, you need to give them the best experience that you can give them for that money. So if the money is a nominal amount, say if it's like, $5, they still could use that $5 to get a cup of coffee or to buy a card or to buy something at a store. Don't think that just because you're at a convention and the player doesn't necessarily want to be there, that you can just, I hate to use this term, but half-ass it. You need to make sure that you are bringing your best experience to that game for that player. If you are not, then realistically, maybe convention running is not entirely for you. Having said that, though, I've had incredible experiences as a GM at conventions. You get to often introduce players who have never played a role-playing game before to a role-playing game, and you give them that bug that means that they go and then they buy the books and then they start running their own games, and it flows from there. To be the first person to introduce someone to a game is a high that I cannot explain. It's incredibly fulfilling as an experience. So for that reason, I kind of wanted to put a little bit of a guide together for you so that to deal with some of the other things, so that you can focus your entire energy and your inspiration on your game. So let's just start with some basic housekeeping. Number one, often when you are running at a convention, it is best and often recommended to run the same module or the same adventure all the time. Run the same thing over and over and over and over and over. The benefit of this is multifold. So the first benefit is that you will absolutely know that module backwards and forwards. So you won't have to read it, you won't have to research it, you won't have to make notes, because you will know it. You will know it so well that you can absolutely run it like this, like this, like this, like this, and you know all the beats. The downside to that, and there is a downside, is it can often mean, though, that if you're running the same module and you know it so well that you can run it practically in your sleep, then you're not approaching it fresh each time you're running it. That becomes boring for you, but it becomes really super boring for your players, because your players will pick up on that you have run this thing so many times and that you are bored by it. I have modules like that where I have run them so many times over and over and over and over for conventions that I do know them that well. But the thing that I will say is that scenario is every single time that you go to run that module, treat it like it's the first time you've ever run it. Reread it, reread sections, make sure that that you've got things all prepared, that you sort of, you're not going through the motions. That player doesn't know that you've run that module 60 times before. As far as that player knows, this is the first time you've ever run it. So treat it like it is new every single time. The other side, though, is that for each module that you are running, so each adventure you are running, bear in mind that you're probably going to do in the area of, if you do a lot of prep like I do, you're going to probably do in the area of about 8 hours prep for every hour that you run. So you do get economies of scale where if you're running a printed module, it's quicker and things like that rather than running one that you've written yourself. But be aware, you will need to prepare. You will need to give yourself time to prepare. Try not to, it's easy for me to say this, but try not to prepare the night before you are ready to run, because otherwise you are going to absolutely stress yourself out unnecessarily. The second thing I want to talk about, and this is a big one, and yes, we got a Catadutha in the video this time, is the fact that time matters. Now, I will say that every single game that you have at a convention is time locked. You have a certain amount of time to run your adventure, no more, no less. And certainly, if you run short, it's okay. But if you run long, it becomes a really big problem. So make sure you know your timings of your adventure, how long it's going to take, because to get from here to here to here to here. In a lot of scenarios that are written specifically for this purpose, so I am referring to Adventurers League and the stuff that's been published for Call of Chaos, for instance, they will have time limits. They will say you should be at this point by this particular point. It's very helpful, especially if you are running something like that, you're running that module over and over. It is absolutely vital when you are running at a smaller convention or a convention that's not dedicated to gaming specifically. So I'm going to talk about Oz Comic Con in Australia, the geek markets. I think they've called something else now, but anything like that where you don't have even 3 to 4 hours, you've got an hour to get that player through a scenario. It is really important that you get them through in that hour. You don't have the luxury of time to spend with them beyond that. They will get bored and they will leave, or worse than that, they won't commit to your game. If they know your game is going to take 2 hours, they won't commit. And the reason being is, back to the point I made at the very beginning of the video, they are not there to roleplay. They are there to actually experience the convention, and they will absolutely get FOMO if you have them there for too long. So just be aware that that's a reality. So again, time matters. Make sure you've got your timing right. Having said about time matters as well, make sure you do actually test your timing. So run your scenario for your friends or your regular group, or a bunch of, run online with a bunch of strangers, anything that you need to do in order for you to get that mechanic and that timing before you turn up. All right, I'm going to get a little harsh now. On the topic of time matters, you only have 3 hours, or you might have an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours to run your game. Maximum I've ever seen is 4 hours, and it's very rare to get the 4 hours, by the way. You do not have the luxury of going off on tangents. You do not have the luxury of going on completely sandboxing it and opening up the world for whatever they want to do. You don't have the luxury of, you need to look up a rule. You don't have you have to make decisions on the fly. You just, if the rule is wrong, the rule is wrong. You just have to deal. You don't have the luxury of all of those things, and you certainly do not have the luxury to sit at your table and tell your players about your fantastic idea that you had and spend half an hour talking about your fantastic idea in the middle of your adventure. Now, I know that there will be some people who will feel very called out by me saying that, um, because they probably recognize me and go, "Oh yeah, I did that." If you are one of those people who really want to talk about your scenario, by all means, people are happy to talk about afterwards. Like they will stick around, can happily talk to you about it, but not during your game, not during that 3 hour window. You really, really need to keep it really super tight. Let's talk about players. So, I've got a couple of things in relation to this that I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to talk about players and then I'm going to talk about pre-gen. So they're interlinked and I'll explain why. There is an expectation from your GM, from all of us GMs, that when a player turns up to the table with their character, that they know what their character can do. I will say to you, often that's not the case. It's like the amount of times that you'll have brand new players who have never played before, or they've never played that particular type of character before, or they've never played that system before, or whatever. The assumption that because it's an experienced player, they know what they're doing is absolutely a fallacy, and you need to be very aware that you will need to help your players, and also other players may need to help other players. So bear that in mind. That absolutely, having that expectation going in, expecting that they're going to absolutely nail it will make you, it'll make your hair turn white. In relation to players, though, one of the biggest challenges that I have at conventions is being heard. You can hear my natural speaking voice on these videos. I'm not necessarily the loudest person, although there will be a lot of my workmates who will disagree with me on that. But at a convention, you will have tables very close together, and being able to hear is really, really important. So, a couple of tips around players being able to hear. Number one, encourage your players to let you know if they cannot hear you or if they are having trouble hearing you. Don't let them be shy about it. If they can't hear you, they're not enjoying the game because they're not hearing what's going on. The second one is, and this is one that is probably going to sound really strange, but I stand up when I'm GMing. I don't sit up. I don't sit down. And I certainly don't sit behind my screen. The reason that I do that is an old acting trick. When you stand up, you're actually stretching your chest and your diaphragm, which means it's easier to get air to your vocal cords, which means you can project your voice easier without straining and without shouting. It is absolutely important that you are heard, but if that is all it needs to do to actually stand up and move, and that helps you, then that is a win. Alternatively, and this is something I do, but it's not something you have to, is I get up and move around my table. Often I will walk around and actually sit with my players so that they can hear me. Now, before you do that, I will put this in place. So it's just this. Tell your players you're going to do that. Don't just spring it on them. They get freaked out. For some reason, players get freaked out. The GM is checking on them when they come around and sit behind them or sit beside them. The second thing is that I always remind my players that I'm doing that to help them to hear, because I know that often it's hard to hear what's going on, especially when the convention is noisy. So, and it's often for me too, when I have players that are very soft spoken, it's often easier for me to hear if I'm around with them rather than sitting behind my DM screen. So there's a couple of things, just little tips around players and helping players out for you. In relation to pre-generated characters, you should know those characters like the back of your hand. If you have created a character specifically for your scenario, or there is one that's come as part of the package with the scenario that you're running, you should absolutely know what that character can do. Number one, it means you can help your players. Number two, it means that you can help yourself. And three, it also reinforces rule sets, particularly if you are playing different rule sets. I find for myself, I often get tripped up because I'm running 3 or 4 rule sets at any one time in different games. So I will often, most commonly, it is insight checks versus perception checks versus initiative check versus spot hidden check and listen check. And hearing me say all of those, for those of you who are seasoned GMs, you'll absolutely know, oh, she's talking about D&D, and then she's talking about Starfinder or Pathfinder, then she's talking about Call of Cthulhu. It's very easy to get those mixed up. Having your GM screen in front of you is really useful because it prompts you. It tells you which of their skills are there. So it often means that you'll come back to, oh yes, I'm running this particular game. That's what the check is. It won't be as common for a lot of GMs if they only run one system, but just be aware, if you run multiple systems, having a proper GM screen in front of you is a godsend for that reason. Okay, so a couple of housekeeping things. One, I start my games with a couple of things. One is explaining to players it is okay if they can't hear me to speak up. I also explain to them that they always have what is known as an X card. It's called different things, but X card is the most common one for this. It is a card, a physical representation of, if you are uncomfortable with a topic, that you flash that card up and the GM skips to the next scene or moves past it or whatever and doesn't continue down that track. It's important that we have games that are safe and fun, and that triggering negative emotions in people is not fun. It's not fun. It doesn't make it a great experience. So if you have those mechanisms available to you, absolutely use them. The other thing I always do too, and it's because I'm a horror GM, is I often will tell my players, I will put disclaimers around what is in my content. So I will often say, look, I'm running a folk horror game. There is elements of this and this in this. If any of this makes you uncomfortable, let me know now before we start. Alternatively, you always have the X card if it gets too intense or too much for you. But when you're talking about conventions as well, you're not bringing your full tentacled monster out. You are toning it back, because you may not have young players at your table, but there will be young players around you. So you do need to be aware of that. That as much as you would love to, have the full, if you're running Alien, for instance, have the full power of the xenomorph and the full horror of the xenomorph running. But if you're running in the middle of the day, a 1 hour scenario with kids around you, you cannot do that. So you do need to tone back. Make things PG when you're at conventions. Not all conventions and not all time slots, by the way. There are a lot of conventions that will allow for horror GMs in particular to run later sessions. And put age restrictions on those sessions and move them away. So have a space dedicated to those GMs so that they don't overlap with younger players. So there is those sorts of things being aware of, but yeah, just to be that. The other one, I guess, with housekeeping, it's really one that I think of for Call of Cthulhu in particular. I always put yes, we know H.P. Lovecraft was a racist POS, and we don't have to talk about that, but that's not got any place in the modern game. If you are running older scenarios, Call of Cthulhu is a little Arkham Horror. There's a number of things that are based off Lovecraft as well that kind of need that disclaimer in front of them. As much as it sounds like, when I do it, it sounds so rehearsed. I've said it so many times. It is important that, again, it reinforces that you understand and acknowledge that there is an element to this particular thing that isn't great. But you are doing your best to run the game without that element in there. And again, it reinforces people have got X cards. They've got things that they can say no to. But it is one of those things, when you're doing your prep, if you're coming across anything, if you read something and you go, this is problematic for me, probably the most safest course of action I can suggest for you is to take it out. It doesn't have to be there. It won't make this module any worse or better by you taking out something that you think is problematic in 2026. It's not going to be the end of the world. It will not change the plot dramatically if you take a problematic element out. I'm just going to say it straight up. It won't affect the module at all. Lastly, let's talk about some fun stuff now that we've done all the serious stuff. So, costumes and props. Let's start with props because that's probably the easier one. There is nothing better when you look at your table and someone has a physical representation of a monster or something on their table to represent that thing. I mean, I have I have got fully painted miniatures for a number of my monsters. Often, if I'm not just doing theatre of the mind, often with the 1 hour ones, I just do theatre of the mind. I will have one of my Cthulhu's, so probably this guy right here, sitting on my table, just in front of my GM screen. I have had theming around a lot of my scenarios, so the fact I will have, for a 1980 scenario, they all end up with little plastic Rubik's cubes and little discount recorders and things. So props can absolutely make your game. You don't have to do props. You don't have to do them. Do them to a level that you're comfortable. But when someone comes up to your table and they see that you've got actual little figures and things that represent their characters, and I often will have it's often gimmicky, but I will have something that ties them into the game, that's something they can take home, in addition to their character sheet. So I always say to them they can take their character sheets home. Having a actual little thing, something that represents a character or represents the scenario, it means that they can actually take that with them. And it reinforces the experience of that game. I've had the great fortune where people have brought characters back for a second year. So they played a character in a particular year, they've come back and played it again. I have also had the thing where people have come back with the prop that I gave them the last session a year later and showed me, hey, I've still got this prop. Hey, I've still got this thing. All of those things will make your game memorable in the mind of your player. And I think that they're small, but they're absolutely quite, they're small and cheap things, but they're absolutely something you can do to make your games better. Lastly, let's talk about costumes. So I haven't been doing costumes yet for this channel, but I certainly will be as we go through. I will be doing costumes and showing examples of costumes that I wear. So the first thing is your costume, whatever costume you choose to do, you need to have two things in mind with it. One, the costume has to be comfortable. You are going to be in that costume for a number of hours. It has to be comfortable. If your breathing is being restricted because you're wearing a really tight corset, if it's too long and it drags on the floor and you're at risk of tripping, all of those things factor in, because you will need to get up, you will need to walk, you will need to breathe, and you will need to do all of these things while in your costume. So make sure your costume can adapt for that. The second part of it too is, and this is one that I fell into a trap with, so I will say I absolutely have made this mistake. Having a mask on your costume is all good and well, provided that you can talk. If you have a mask, so one of my first famous costumes is I dressed up as the King in Yellow, complete with the pallid mask, with no mouth. So no hole in my mouth, so you could not hear me. So it broke the illusion, because every time I went to talk or I had to run my game, I had to lift my mask up onto my head in order for people to see and be able to hear me. So if you have to do that, there's a flaw in your costume and you need to fix it. I know that sounds really, really arrogant, and only because I've done it, but your costume should be breathable, should be movable, should be able to hear. If you can't do any of those things, it's a great costume. It'll be fantastic to walk on the floor while you're doing a cosplay, but if you're actually interacting with people, like running a game, just rethink your costume slightly. Well, on that note, team, I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm sure that you'll have more questions, and I have more answers around running at conventions. But just a reminder that we have our goal here at R'lyeh Expeditions that we want to get to 100 subscribers by the end of the year. And the way that we can do that is by you liking and subscribing to our videos, you recommending them to friends. Alternatively, I absolutely adore talking about role playing and talking about role playing topics. I absolutely am still quite pleased when anytime someone mentions to me, hey, I saw you at convention last year, I remember your costume, or I still have a prop from one of your games. So I am very much looking forward to joining you at one of your tables, or you joining me at mine, or us sharing a quiet beverage, a nice cup of tea, and a chat about role playing in general. In the meantime, I look forward to the next leg of our journey, and all the best. Thank you. Bye.